Hi, this is the sad story of a simple job turning into a major issue. I was just going to replace the water pump impeller in this Tohatsu 6 horsepower outboard, and in the end it turned it into a major dismantling, and I'll explain a little bit about that. This is how I ended up. The power head disconnected from the pan, which is here, the leg and the lower unit. So normally, as I'm sure you're aware, to drop the lower unit you best basically disconnect the gear linkage, which is in here, a couple of bolts underneath, and this whole thing just pulls out. Well, in this case it wouldn't, it was just waggling here, and obviously it was still connected by the drive shaft, which runs up the leg and into the base of the power head. So I watched a couple of videos on YouTube where they talked about how they turn the engine upside down, poured some penetrating oil. I poured mine in here and let it soak for a week or two, and then with the help of a few wedges they managed to release the lower unit. So I tried the same, and unfortunately what happened was the drive shaft remained connected up the top of the power head and the whole lower unit pulled off. So I was left with a situation where bearings and water pump base, the water pump housing itself was still attached to the lower unit, but the drive shaft had pulled out through the top. So the power shaft, the drive shaft, sorry, was still connected, but this was now free. So I went about taking off the leg, and I ended up with the situation I'm in now. So this part was connected, so I didn't realize it, but this slides down over the drive shaft and kind of got a few seals in it, so none of the penetrating oil I was pouring in was getting to the crux of the problem, which is here. This is the end of the crankshaft, and this is the splined end of the prop shaft that goes into the end of the crankshaft. So nothing was getting in there due to this little piece. So fortunately a friend of me advised I remove this to have a look at what was going on. Then I could see, you know, the wood for the trees. Okay, so turning the prop shaft, you can see the end of the crankshaft revolving. So what I'm going to explain is the process by which I pulled the prop shaft up out of the hole in the end of the crankshaft. Now I looked up this method on the internet, and I found it described in a forum. No video of it, but it was pretty clear explanation, so I went about recreating it, and I'll explain in detail how I went about that. The way, this is a 4-stroke engine, so before you turn your engine upside down, if it happens to be a 4-stroke, make sure you drain the engine oil out of it, otherwise you'll have oil all over the place. So for this process, what I used was a hammer, a couple of chisels, length of tube, a bunch of washers. These all fit over the end of the prop shaft, and these cable clamps and a spanner which will fit and that on these. Now you have to size these cable clamps to fit over the prop shaft and clamp tight. So using my handy ruler, I measured it, and in this case it's a 10 mil drive shaft. Just where it goes a bit like follows. Bunch of these washers drop over the end, so they're located here. 2 really large thick washers. So I needed 2 because unbelievably these started bending under the forces involved. So these are, I hope you can see, these are clear of any surfaces here, because there's gasket's going to go there, so I don't want to damage that. Then, highly technical, couple of pencils. This is going to provide the space into which I'm going to insert my chisels in a minute. couple more washers, put the pencil back. This is a lot easier with two hands. And then on the prop shaft, in various places, there's going to be, well, it's going to be like there's going to be oil seals up here, some sort of bush here, and more oil seals down here. So I don't want to damage any of those areas. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this here metal tube over the top. So I'm going to put the cable clamps here. That is a part of the drive shaft where it's not going to be in contact with anything like bearings, oil seals, etc., etc. So the process goes as follows: drop a clamp over, clamp it up, and I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna need two hands, so I'll show you the finished result in a second. That's the finished situation. The post in the forum, they only mentioned using one of these clamps, and I should really say a big thank you to whoever posted that in the first place, because it really helped me in this situation. But I've gone with 4 clamps because you know, better safe than sorry. Anyway, I'm now going to turn the engine on its side. I should say that you need to find the side of an engine where it's not going to get damaged or anything's going to get broken. So I'm going for this side. Basically, lean it on over. I'm going to move the pencils. And now I'm going to insert these chisels. Probably easier with 2 hands. I'll be back in a minute. Right, chisels jammed in place. Let's move it for a close-up. So they're going in between these washers and these washers. What I did find when I was doing this the first time was the actual, because these are so wedged, these chisels, the whole drive shaft bent so far that this end was down, touching the workbench. Now it was quite alarming, but it doesn't seem to have done any permanent damage. Now, before I start hammering these chisels in, you need to make sure that they're not going to come through and start damaging anything below, like bolt heads or any kind of surfaces like that. So keep an eye on that all the time as you hammer these through. So now it's just a matter of picking up your trusty hammer, hammering these in. So eventually these are going to force their way through until they get to the parallel part, which is probably as far as you need to go, because they're not going to be widening the gap any further at that point. So I had to repeat this step about 5 times before the drive shaft eventually came out, and that's quite a surprising amount of gap. You could probably speed up the process by having some kind of U-shaped or horseshoe shaped washers. You could drop over every time, because once you've removed the chisels, let's go. Once you've removed the chisels, you normally end up with a bit of a gap into which you could, well, I had to keep readjusting these to take up the gap. But if you had some U-shaped things to drop over, that would speed up the process. As I say, it took about 5 attempts doing this before finally it came free. Anyway, here it is, laughing at me, saying what was the big problem, because now it just slots in and out very easily indeed. Anyway, I want to say another thank you to whoever posted the procedure on the forum in the first place. It got me out of a sticky spot, and maybe hopefully this video will help someone else out. Oh, I should mention the original post. They didn't use 2 chisels like this. They used something called a pickle fork, which I believe is a mechanic's tool for separating sort of ball joints or something like that, I believe. Anyway, these seem to do the job. So if you haven't got a pickle fork, get a couple of these. Anyway, I hope that helps. Oh yeah, I'd like to add, does anyone understand what the heck jammed this in the first place? Because, like, as you can see, so there's no impediment to its removal at the moment. So any ideas, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you. Other last minute thought was a couple of plugs in various places to stop any crap getting into places it shouldn't. Something else I should have mentioned is the idea of putting the washers over the drive shaft so they're pressing against the end of the crankshaft is you're pushing against the crankshaft, so you're less likely to damage the crankshaft by trying to drag it sideways, against bearings and other kind of important stuff like that. So another benefit of using this method.